With all the demands on me at work and all the responsibilities I have at home, is there more to life than just being constantly stressed out and feeling guilty because I can't do it all? This is the Leadership on the Rocks podcast, where we equip and empower leaders like you to not only thrive in, but create harmony between your professional and personal lives. I'm your host, Bethany Reese. And in today's episode, we're going to talk about how do we stop drowning in the waves of circumstance, stress, anxiety, and fear, and move our lives and leadership to higher ground. Okay, let me know if this sounds like a typical day for you. Your alarm goes off, you wake up, and you're already exhausted, right? It takes everything you have to get out of bed. You go, you get in the shower, and then the battle of your mind begins. You're thinking of all the reasons why you don't want to go to work, but you know it's the right thing to do. So you try to psych yourself up, you get ready, you go, you make your coffee or your tea. If you have kids, you're waking them up, trying to get everybody ready. You get out of the house. You always feel like you're running late. And then you get to work and the real chaos begins, right? Everybody needs your attention. Everybody wants time with you. Your email wants time with you. Your meetings wants time with you. Your coworkers want time with you. And your boss wants time with you. So there you go. You're going back and forth like a revolving door, spinning from one problem to the next, to the next, to the next. It feels never ending. And then you have the thought at the end of the workday, did I eat lunch? Did I even go to the bathroom? Right? And then you don't get to go home to a nice peaceful evening. No, if you have kids, you're now beginning the chauffeur. They have activities they got to get to. If you don't have kids, you still have all the demands of home. The laundry is not going to do itself. The dishes, they're piling up. Somebody needs to wash them. Oh, and dinner, right? Did you plan it? Do you have the groceries to make it? Oh no, you got to order takeout again, right? So that's your evening. And by the time everybody gets to bed, you're sitting there and you're exhausted. And then you just want to numb yourself because you're like, I can't even anymore. Calgon, take me away. So you pull out your phone, you binge the Netflix, or you pour yourself a drink on the rocks or maybe a glass of wine. And then that's how you end your evening. You go to bed, your alarm goes off, you wake up and you do it all again. Rinse and repeat, right? Does that sound anything like your day? Is it just me? Because that was pretty much my life for a couple of years. And I was just going as fast as I could, spinning, solving problems, revolving door, right? Trying to meet with everybody who had expectations of my time or demanded something from me. And no matter what, I did not feel like a good leader at work, a good teammate at work. And I definitely didn't feel like I was doing a good job at home either. And so what ended up happening is I'm just constantly carrying around this baggage of guilt that I'm not doing a good job at work or at home. And I'm feeling that guilt, and that guilt turns into a slippery slope that leads to anxiety. And if you're not careful, you'll go even further into depression. If any of that resonates with you, then this is the podcast for you. With Leadership on the Rocks, we're going to talk about how do we grow and thrive, not only in our professional lives and leadership, but at home. And how do we find harmony, not balance, but harmony between the two? Okay, so why Leadership on the Rocks, Bethany? What's up with the name? Well, first, it reminds me of having a drink, which so many stressed out people do, right? They pour a drink on their rocks. But really, it's based on a metaphor. So I got to tell you about the extended metaphor, and I got to tell you about my sense of humor. I love puns. I love good puns, and I love them, the ones that are funny. So it makes me think of like Blake Shelton's Some Beach Somewhere, right? Or Randy Travis's On the Other Hand. Yes, I'm a fan of country. So, and with the extended metaphor, you got to think of Garth Brooks and the dance. Life is a dance, right? So with Leadership on the Rocks, I want to use the extended metaphor. And now listen carefully as I say this. Life is a beach. Do you agree? Can you say that out loud? Yes, life is a beach. It is tough. Okay, now let me back up and say that a little more slowly. Life is a beach. Sand, waves, okay? Water. All right, so if life is a beach, here's what we're doing every day. All right, think about the scenario I just gave you of waking up and going through that cycle every single day. We, if life is a beach, are building our lives and leaderships on the sand. We're building sand castles. And guess what? Have you ever been to the beach? What happens to your sandcastle? Waves come and knock it down. And guess what? You're rebuilding again. And so most of our lives are built around the sand elements of the waves of circumstance. Waves come and go. The tides, they're strong, they're weak, they come, they pull. Sand gets blown around even by the wind. So to build our life on the sand is not effective, and it makes us feel stressed constantly. And so this podcast is all about leaving the beach and climbing to higher ground and growing in our leadership so that we can build our leadership on the rocks, right? As Jesus said in Matthew chapter 7, the wise man built his house on the rocks, and the storms came and the wind blew and the streams rose and the house stood firm. But the foolish man built his house on the sand, and the rains came and the wind blew and the streams rose and the house went splash, right? So if you're thinking about how you can grow professionally in your leadership, being a good teammate, leading professionally at work, but then also without sacrificing your home life, this is the podcast for you. That's what we're going to talk about. So for years, I got to tell you a little backstory on me. So I have been an educator for 18 years. I was a teacher, moved into an instructional coach, and my last position was a high school administrator. And so I have felt the pressure of trying to please everybody, every expectation that was out there for me, from the kids to the teachers, to the parents, to the public, to the policies even. All right. It was a lot of stress. And through that process, I feel like I have really learned how to build my life and leadership on essential rocks so that when those circumstances come, when the storms come, when the pandemic came, right? Not to be overtaken and not to have my house crash. So through this podcast, I'm going to be like a curator, bringing information to you, bringing examples, talking through different scenarios. As an administrator, I have been through a lot of scenarios. And so let's talk about how we grow as a leader at work, but then how those skill sets also apply to leading at home and how we can find that harmony between. Now, I have to tell you, I'm just an average person. I'm actually in a spare bedroom with a computer, a mic, and 2 little lights that I bought on Amazon, right? I am not a podcaster per se, although I really do enjoy this. I enjoy talking to you. So the goal of this podcast is for me to bring the information, the best practices, the principles, the universal truths, right? So that we can talk about them, talk about different situations and scenarios you may find yourself in. But it's just a podcast. The real work of growth to building your life and leadership on the rocks is with you. It's what you do with the information that you have, and how do you take that knowledge and turn it into wisdom so that you're making good choices and making the best next decision to go through and solve the problems that you find yourself in, or make the decisions and planning that you're going forward in your life. And so how do you get from knowledge to wisdom? So you've got to reflect, take the information, process it, apply it to your life, apply it to your mindset, your paradigms, your personality, your leadership style, and then your situations. So through this podcast, we're going to be talking about a lot of things, and I want you to be involved. I want you to subscribe. I want you to leave your comments, your questions, your situations, and your advice. You know so much. You have been through so much. I want you to share that with our community. And let's support each other as we work to get off the sand, get off the beach, and build our life and leadership on the rocks. Now, it's important that you understand where the information is coming from, right? If I am the curator, like in a museum, bringing you lots of information, I need you to know I'm not just making this stuff up, all right? I'm getting it from the gurus of leadership. And we're going to start with guru number 1. God. What does God say about leadership in the Bible? So we will have a lot of references to scripture and different situations in the Bible and the leadership that it took in that certain situation. And then we'll also look at the gurus that you know and love, and you've probably read a lot of their books. We will talk about one of my favorites, Stephen R. Covey's The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, right? That is an amazing book that will help you in all aspects of your life, professionally and personally. We're going to talk about Pat Lencioni's The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team, as well as the 3 Big Questions for a Frantic Family. We're going to talk about John Maxwell, who has a ton of books about leadership and how to lead. And then we'll talk about Greg McKeown's Essentialism and Effortless. In Essentialism, it's all about how do you focus on the priorities. Everybody is pulling for your time and attention, and they have expectations on you. Well, how do you decide what the priorities are and then step into those? We'll also talk about his book, Effortless, which is, all about taking the easier path to doing the work. Instead of taking the harder path, it doesn't have to be hard. It can be effortless. So how do we make those systems and processes and things that we have to do more effortless? We'll talk about Simon Sinek's Start With Why and a ton of other amazingly smart people and their books. Now, let me tell you why I love all these people. I am very, very picky in who I get advice from, right? I am a simple girl from a simple town in Arkansas who only had access to Walmart, right? I don't know about name brands or what's trending out there or what's going viral. And the reason I don't pay attention to those things is because it's here today, gone tomorrow. That is a sand way of living life. What is popular now? And so through this podcast and all the resources we use, they are going to be based on universal truths and principles that will always be here and always be true. And they always need to be considered, not only in our work life and in our leadership, but in our home life. That's how you build a life on the essential rocks. So let me give you an example of universal truths, principles, and what I mean by this. So let's pretend, let's just have a little story time, if you will. There's two leaders and they're out walking in the desert. Don't worry, they're properly hydrated. So they're out walking in the desert and they're having a conversation. And one leader says, you know what, there's a canyon coming up. I'm going to scoot over a little bit. I'm not going to walk on the edge because of gravity. I don't want gravity to take effect of me and me fall to my death. So he steps several feet away from the edge of that canyon. The other leader says, gravity never hurt anybody. And you know what? I like living on the edge. So he starts walking along the edge of the canyon. And yes, he has the better view of the desert and the canyon and all of those things. Well, then all of a sudden, a big wind comes and it stirs up a massive dust storm, right? Both leaders are affected by this storm. Matter of fact, both leaders are blinded by this storm. However, the one that knew about and respected the law of gravity will be safe through that storm. However, the other one that's on the edge is going to lose his sense of direction and where he's at, and he's not going to feel stable. And yes, that leader during the storm fell to his death. I know, it's a tragic story, but that's the reason that we want to build our life and leadership on the essential rocks of universal truths and principles. So everything that we talk about in this podcast will be based on those, and they will always be listed in the show notes. So you can go check out the resources or the books that are listed there and engage in that resource yourself. So I am so excited to go on this journey with you. And I'm so glad you decided to join me as we work to get off the sand and quit drowning, right? Get away from that and to go to higher ground and live our life and leadership on the rocks. All right. I'm going to see you next week where we're going to talk about mindset and paradigm and how it affects everything we do as a person and as a leader. See you next week. Hey, it's Bethany again. If you like this podcast and you feel like it's helpful, will you do me a favor? Will you share it with your friends, family, coworkers, anybody else who is trying to grow in leadership, but also wants to have that harmony between work and home? Thank you so much. And don't forget, leave your comments, questions, stories, or advice below. We'll definitely talk about it in the podcast. Remember, the most important rock you can build your life on is the rock of Jesus Christ. Today's Bible verse comes from Matthew 7:24 through 27. Therefore, everyone who hears these words of mine and puts them into practice is like a wise man who built his house on the rock. The rain came down, the streams rose, and the winds blew and beat against that house. Yet it did not fall because it had its foundation on the rock. But everyone who hears these words of mine and does not put them into practice is like a foolish man who built his house on the sand. The rain came down, the streams rose, and the winds blew and beat against that house, and it fell with a great crash.